Hey everyone, welcome to another daily cinephile vlog. Well, we have another January release, but don't worry, it has one of the biggest celebrities in the world at the moment. So I'm sure you all heard about it. Miller's Girl, starring Jenna Ortega. It also has Martin Freeman, and it's always a good sign when the movie has two incredibly noteworthy actors, and the actors have done no publicity for the movie, and you've seen no marketing for the movie. It's always a good sign, right? I didn't really know what to expect with Miller's Girl at all. It's just a new movie that came out this week. I was trying to figure out, where did this movie come from? How did it come to be? Well, it's from Point Grey, which is the studio that's owned by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. And they've released a lot of, Seth Rogen movies, but the point is that they've released some pretty noteworthy comedies in the last decade. Then you have Miller's Girl, which isn't a comedy. It's more of a, I suppose, psychological thriller, but and then again, I'm not exactly sure what genre this sits in. But given that the movie was originally on the blacklist, it was a screenplay that was purchased all the way back in 2016. And given what the movie is, which is a very confusing piece of cinema, you would think that the production must have absolutely tarnished the original screenplay. But what's weird is that it's actually directed by the person who wrote it, so I have no idea what happened. It's sort of a return to the sex thriller that used to be pretty popular in cinemas. Stuff like Basic Instinct, Fatal Attraction. And then there were movies in the 90s that were marketed towards the young adult demographic. And then you can even take in black comedies like American Beauty or Election even. Those types of movies that they don't necessarily make anymore. They make them, but they're much more done on the indie side, and they're not really genre pieces anymore. This type of movie just isn't made anymore. Maybe that's why it didn't get marketed, because the subject matter is a little, I would say, controversial in a sense, because what it is a relationship between a teacher and a student. So that alone is like, oops, can't really do that anymore. Martin Freeman plays Mr. Miller, and his new student is Cairo Sweet. She has a narration that goes on throughout the movie, and there's like a love for literature and poetry throughout, and they develop this relationship because he's impressed by her work, but also there's definitely some kind of romantic tension there. He has a very stereotypical wife at home who has pushed him aside, is too busy with work, and he's just a sexually frustrated man. And Cairo Sweet goes from being a schoolgirl with a bit of a crush to becoming a sadistic, scorned woman that makes it her goal to tear down Mr. Miller's life. You have the romantic entanglement, you have the misunderstanding, you have the adult who's trying to cover up the situation, you have the teenager who's trying to make the situation public. For the most part, though, it just never goes full force with whatever it's trying to do. It doesn't really seem all that controversial, because there's not much to what's going on. In a way, they try to play it safe, I guess, make it more okay for modern times. Movies trying to avoid being controversial, even though the subject matter itself is controversial. You know what I mean? Like, it's still playing it safe with this premise because it doesn't really want to tick people off. But if you're not going to tick people off, then I guess I don't really know what you're making the movie for. The reason that these types of movies are made is inherently to tick people off, to get people mad. Because otherwise there's not really anything challenging about what's going on the screen. They barely have a relationship. I mean, they really brush through everything very quickly. And then even at the turning point where things start to change, his attitude towards her starts to change and she starts to react. Even that is done almost like too early. Like, I guess because the movie is so short that it just seems out of nowhere. The way she changes, and then the reaction to everything, it's like all that and the consequences. You don't even really see the consequences in the end. I feel like with the narration and the dialogue, they're trying to say something deeper about the piece overall, but I just don't see anything there. It seems like the movie's trying to be a lot smarter than it actually is. And at times, I just didn't understand what kind of movie they were going for. Because it's not a funny movie, which, I guess it's not meant to be like a black comedy. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like a thriller because it just never goes full force with the controversy. This movie plays it just about as safe as it could for a movie about a relationship between a teenager and a teacher. It has everything it needs to make sure it never gets too uncomfortable with the source material. But it's weird because, like, already it's uncomfortable. I mean, it's a relationship between a teacher and a teenager. I'm already grossed out by the whole notion of it, so, like, dig into that, but they just never do because I don't think they want to. It's like they're too afraid to go any further with what they're doing, and again, it just makes me wonder, why are they making this? The performances are fine, but I mean, when you got Martin Freeman and Jenna Ortega, I mean, the performances are going to turn out fine. You know, she's got this friend too in the movie that I just never caught on to what she was doing, because the teenagers talk in a way that it almost feels like teenagers wrote them. Like, it's written in that way that theater art kids in high school write about themselves and make themselves sound cooler and more culturally with it than they actually are, I guess. Because, you know, you have a very crooked view of yourself when you're a teenager. And I guess you could kind of dig into that. Like, you could have made it more of a black comedy, maybe rode more into like the Heathers route, or even more like the election route. And then she starts treating her friend in a way that sort of came out of nowhere. It could have been something there about like sexual frustrations or sexual confusion, but this movie just doesn't really have a capacity to really ever dig into that more. It's not a good movie. I mean, I give it 1 out of 5 stars. This has been like a trend lately where it's just a lot of movies that are very tonally confused, that don't really want to just dive into their genre, because yeah, I think at this point, like with a lot of genre pieces, they want to avoid cliches and stereotypes. If your movie's meant to be a comedy, then make it a comedy. If it's meant to be a thriller, then really make it a thriller. But don't do that thing where you start trimming so much out of it because you're like afraid it to be this type of movie. That's the thing. It's a movie that is just afraid to be what it is. I have no idea how our theater got this movie and not American Fiction. Why on earth have we not had American Fiction yet, but somehow we got Miller's Girl?